At dawn on January 8, 1815, more than 5,000 British soldiers, hardened veterans of the Napoleonic Wars, advanced in tight columns across an open Louisiana field toward a thin line of American defenders. They moved with the precision of men who had shattered the finest armies in Europe, drums rolling, bayonets fixed, regimental colors raised high. Within a single hour, over 2,000 of them were dead, wounded, or captured. The Americans lost fewer than 70. That is not an exaggeration. That is the most one-sided major engagement of the entire War of 1812. And by the time you finish this, you will understand exactly how it happened, and why the empire responsible spent 2 centuries trying to erase it from the historical record. What hung in the balance on that field was not merely a battle. It was control of the Mississippi River, the commercial lifeblood of half a continent. Fur, grain, timber, and cotton all flowed south, down that waterway to New Orleans and out into the Gulf of Mexico. Whoever held that city held the key to the American interior. Britain, fresh from torching Washington, D.C. just months earlier, had assembled the largest invasion force ever dispatched to the Americas. If New Orleans fell, the young republic could be split in 2. This was not a frontier skirmish. This was an empire reaching to strangle a nation before it could fully draw breath. 2 questions should press at you. How did one of the most professional armies on earth march into a slaughter so absolute that their own government tried to bury it? And how did a general commanding pirates, freed slaves, and backwoods riflemen pull off the most lopsided victory of the entire war? By mid-1814, the War of 1812 was going badly for the United States. The British had torched Washington in August, gutting the president's mansion and shattering American morale. Along the Canadian border, military campaigns had buckled into a grinding stalemate. The United States Navy, capable of occasional brilliance, was hopelessly outgunned by the global reach of the Royal Navy. Then Britain received the opening it had been waiting for. Napoleon's collapse in Europe freed tens of thousands of Peninsular War veterans, men who had campaigned across Spain and Portugal, who had broken French armies at Salamanca, Vittoria, and Toulouse. Without serious argument, they were the finest professional soldiers alive. London sent them west. The target was New Orleans, and the reasoning was purely economic. Whoever held that city controlled the Mississippi. Whoever controlled the Mississippi controlled the commerce of half a continent. Seizing it could permanently sever the eastern seaboard from the interior territories, potentially unraveling the Louisiana Purchase altogether. The man assigned to defend New Orleans was Andrew Jackson, a Tennessee general of iron resolve, who arrived in December 1814 and immediately imposed martial law. Civilians, judges, and merchants alike, no exemptions. The man sent to take it was Major General Sir Edward Pakenham, Wellington's own brother-in-law. London expected swift results. Here is the detail that makes everything which follows almost unbearable. On December 24, 1814, 2 full weeks before the battle, British and American diplomats in Ghent had already signed a peace treaty. The war was technically over, but news in 1815 moved only by sail. No telegraph, no cable. The men about to kill each other outside New Orleans had no knowledge that an armistice had been agreed thousands of miles away. Every shot fired, every life lost would be, in the coldest reckoning, entirely unnecessary. Britain assembled between 8,000 and 11,000 troops for the Gulf campaign. Not garrison soldiers, but peninsular veterans who had faced Napoleon's marshals in open battle and won decisively. The confidence in their camp bordered on arrogance. These men had dismantled the greatest military force in European history. American farmers and militia irregulars were not expected to present a serious obstacle. Some officers reportedly wagered on how quickly the campaign would end. Jackson's army was unlike anything the British had encountered, not in its numbers, but in its composition. He had roughly 4,000 to 5,000 men drawn from every corner of American society: regular infantry, Tennessee and Kentucky militia, frontier marksmen who had grown up rifle in hand, capable of hitting a target at 300 yards, Louisiana militia that included free men of color, among the first black soldiers to serve in organized American formations, Choctaw warriors who knew the bayous better than any map could convey, New Orleans merchants standing beside dock laborers who had never held a weapon in their lives, and Jean Lafitte, notorious smuggler of Barataria Bay, who traded a full pardon for gunpowder, flints, and detailed intelligence. On the waterways south of the city, this coalition had no business working. These men shared almost nothing. Not language, not class, not culture, not legal standing. But Jackson welded them into a single defensive line, then chose his ground with a predator's instinct. He fortified the Rodriguez Canal, a dry drainage ditch on the Chalmette plantation, transforming it into a 1.5-mile earthen parapet fronted by the canal as a dry moat. Behind it, he positioned 24 artillery pieces, loaded with grape shot and canister. The line was anchored left by the Mississippi and right by impenetrable cypress swamp, funneling any attacker into a narrowing open corridor of cane fields with no cover and no means of flanking. Every step forward carried attackers deeper into overlapping fields of fire. In the most precise and terrible sense, it was a killing ground, and the British were marching directly toward it. The signal rocket tore into the gray sky at roughly 6 o'clock on January 8th. The fog had not fully cleared. Colonel Thornton's flanking force, tasked with crossing the Mississippi by night and seizing the West Bank batteries, was hours behind schedule, swept far downstream by the river current. No signal had come from the West Bank. Nothing. Pakenham faced the decision that would define his legacy and end his life: wait and lose what remained of the morning mist, or advance without the flanking element in position. He ordered the advance. 5,300 British soldiers stepped into the open cane fields in the dense columns that had broken French lines across a dozen European battlefields. Those same formations would destroy them here. From behind the parapet, the fog thinned like a curtain drawing back from a stage. Then the redcoats became visible. Hundreds of yards of scarlet advancing in disciplined ranks, drums beating the cadence. Jackson held his battery commanders. Wait, then he gave the order. 24 cannons fired canister and grapeshot simultaneously. Massive shotgun blasts of iron pellets discharged directly into packed human columns at close range. Canister doesn't wound. It erases. Entire files of men cease to exist. Then the rifle fire began. The Tennessee and Kentucky marksmen at the center of Jackson's line opened up at ranges that staggered British observers. These men did not fire in synchronized volleys. They selected individual targets. Officers on horseback fell first. Then sergeants. Then standard bearers. Then anyone still standing. The American line crackled with continuous rolling fire, each man reloading and shooting independently. Every round aimed and deliberate. The carnage concentrated in Major General Gibbs' column, aimed directly at the strongest section of the parapet. Gibbs rode forward to rally his men. He was hit. He kept riding. He was hit again and tumbled from his horse into the mud, mortally wounded. When his column finally reached the Rodriguez Canal, they discovered the catastrophe that sealed their fate. The scaling ladders were not there. The regiment tasked with carrying the ladders and fascines needed to bridge the ditch had failed somewhere in the smoke and confusion of the advance. The surviving soldiers arrived at a 6-foot obstacle, backed by a sheer mud wall, and nothing to cross it with. They had marched 400 yards through hell to reach an obstacle they could not pass. Pakenham rode personally into the storm to rally the disintegrating assault. He was hit in the arm. He kept riding. His horse was killed beneath him. He mounted a second. He rose in the saddle, turned toward his shattered men, and a blast of grapeshot struck him full in the spine. He was carried from the field, barely conscious, and died within the hour. Wellington's brother-in-law perished in a Louisiana cane field, in a battle fought after a peace already signed an ocean away. Major General Lambert, now the senior officer on the field, surveyed the carnage with the clear eyes of a man who had not been inside the maelstrom. 2 generals down. Columns shattered. The field covered with red-coated dead and wounded in every direction. No breach anywhere in the American line, not once, not at any point along its mile-and-a-half length. He ordered the retreat. From the first signal rocket to the withdrawal order, fewer than 60 minutes had elapsed. When the final count was made, the numbers were almost impossible to credit. British casualties, between 2,000 and 2,600, roughly 300 to 386 killed outright, 1,200 to 1,500 wounded, over 500 captured or missing. 3 generals struck from the field. American casualties, between 55 and 65 total. For every American who fell, approximately 30 to 40 British soldiers were killed, wounded, or taken prisoner. In a single hour, on a field barely 400 yards deep. Every death had occurred after the war was already over. In Britain, the shock was swallowed quickly by the larger drama across the Channel. Napoleon escaped Elba in March. At Waterloo in June 1815, many of the same regiments that had bled at Chalmette marched to their defining triumph, and that victory became the story of 1815. New Orleans was quietly buried. Casualty figures were softened. The entire campaign was reduced to a single embarrassing paragraph in British military histories, if it appeared at all. It was not a formal suppression. It was selective memory. The battle had occurred after the peace was signed, giving historians on both sides a convenient excuse to look away. On January 8, 1815, more than 5,000 of the finest soldiers on earth marched into an open Louisiana field. 60 minutes later, over 2,000 were gone. The Americans lost fewer than 70. It was the bloodiest hour of the War of 1812, the end of British ambitions on the American mainland, and one of the most deliberately forgotten engagements in military history. Now you know why they tried to erase it.